Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I am Bernita Howard, the founder of Breaking the Silence on Domestic Violence. I come to you tonight with a couple of friends who is very passionate about domestic violence and spreading awareness. We come to you tonight to talk to you about sexual assault and domestic violence. Sexual assault, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience a form of sexual violence involving physical contact during his or her lifetime. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 4 males experience rape between the ages of 11 to 17 years of age, and 1 in 8 women and 1 in 4 males experience a form of rape before the age of 10. That is why it is so important that we have these conversations because it's not just happening in adulthood, it's happening to our children. So I want everyone to remember, ask first and remember no means no. So we're going to discuss sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, domestic violence. We're going to discuss all that tonight. It's a little bit emotional for me because it's a lot. So before we get into our interview, we're gonna have Don Estes to introduce himself and why he's involved.
My name is Don Estes. I'm with the Tina Stewart Foundation to bring awareness to domestic violence, to create laws to protect or to put these perpetrators out on a registry so everybody knows who they are. And this is not just for domestic violence. And I'll just explain a little bit about it. It affects children too, not just the women out there. The children are affected too, and so many times they're abused and they're forgotten. But that's who I am. I'm with the Tina Stewart Foundation.
Midori, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I can. Hi, my name is Midori Davidson. I am with Breaking the Silence Against Domestic Violence, where I currently serve on the board. I started out as a regular volunteer and kind of worked my way around the organization. I got involved with Breaking the Silence because I am a survivor of domestic violence. I am also a survivor of sexual assault. So, what many don't understand is that the two often go hand in hand, um, and they're not discussed in a collaborative effort. People seem to think that domestic violence is separate from sexual assault. But when you are being abused in the same home by a perpetrator that you are well aware of, there's sexual assault right there. It's already present, but it isn't discussed. People want to isolate the two, and you really can't.
So, Midori, you spoke a little bit about about being a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence, and you're right. Sexual assault and rape are, they're able to they can get charges behind them, but there are many forms of domestic violence, where a perpetrator is not charged. But being a survivor of sexual assault, a lot of times people are asked, "Why didn't you come forward?" And when this happened to you, did you come forward right then, or did it take you a while?
So I'm going to tell you of two different experiences. My first experience, I was 4 years old, and I was molested by my babysitter's 13-year-old brother. It took my mother's insight to gather that information because at the age of 4, your vocabulary is very limited as to describing your experience. She just happened to notice that one day it hurt for me to sit on my bum bum. So she wanted to see if there were any bruises. And she asked me questions that ultimately gave her the answer that she needed, which was I was molested. She asked me, was I touched inappropriately? And I described of a game that the 15-year-old would create, and it was called Super Friends because that was the popular cartoon back then. We're talking the mid 1970s. So when I described Super Friends to her, she knew to ask me, well, what do you mean you guys are playing Super Friends? Did he have you in a certain way? And I answered those questions for her. And when we confronted the family, well, my mother, she took it to the street. She went and got a beer bottle, cracked it open, wrapped it up in a brown paper bag. And her goal was to attack the boy and the entire family. And as soon as they opened the door, that's exactly what she commenced to do. She chased them all over the house. The police were called and the situation was reported, but rather than address me and my need, they were trying to decide whether or not my mother should be arrested for reckless behavior. And this was 1976. Fast forward to 1987, I was raped at 15. And this time, I was a freshman in high school. It was by a guy I knew. And what I didn't realize was that this was a setup that he had orchestrated with one of his friends because I told him that I wasn't into him that way. And I said no, and no meant no. And he isolated me in a bedroom where he physically attacked me. And when my head hit the bar of the bed, I was knocked out. So when I came to, I was in a pool of blood and I was 15. So in 1987, this was the year of Reagan, and no means no, and just say no. There wasn't, oh, call this hotline if you want to talk to somebody, to get some kind of advice. There wasn't any of that. So there was no one to report to. It was either report to my father or figure it out. Well, a couple of my cousins found out and they knew where the boy lived. So they gathered a group of their friends and they went to his house later that night, threw some rocks at his window to get him to come outside, and then they jumped him. So that was my version of a report. Um, at that time, the only thing to do was to go to the hospital and do a rape kit. At 15, I knew nothing about that. It wasn't like we had education in the schools that discussed what a rape kit was, what a sane nurse was, what the procedures were. There weren't even hardly any discussions within the schools about rape itself. So my 15-year-old mind didn't handle it like rape that needed to be reported. I handled it like, okay, he needs his behind smashed, you know, and seeing the resources that kids have today versus when I was growing up, night and day, night and day. We still need work. There's still work to do, but we have come a long way in terms of the discussion.
I'll deal with that later.
So I noticed one thing that you said, and we've talked about this on the different panels that I've had. In our schools, they teach you about sex education. They don't teach you about healthy relationship. They don't teach you, if you're raped, if you're touched inappropriately, what to do and how to handle it. Um, and my heart goes out to you reliving this, but bringing awareness. So nowadays, it's so much, and you guys will see on the screen. I do have the National Sexual Assault Hotline posted, and also their website. Um, Don, and before I respond a little bit, but I want you to be thinking about consent. Um, so, Midori, as you stated, your family wanted to retaliate, and they did. But one thing, I teach my children from, and I even teach my grandsons. I teach them the appropriate name for their body parts. The reason I do that because of all the training that I have, and especially when you have young children, if you teach them that's their cookie, that's their lollipop, and they come to you and saying something about somebody touched my lollipop, somebody touched my cookie, or somebody ate too much of that, you're thinking about, in the natural, maybe the cookies in the refrigerator, they're trying to tell you that. So what I will say to any parent that's watching, and especially my young moms and my young fathers out there, make sure you're teaching your children their body parts. It's important that you talk to them about that, because if not, somebody else is going to introduce it a whole different other way. I always tell my daughter and my daughters when they're talking to the kids, you know, tell them the proper name for it and tell them the street name for it. We have to be real, with our children, to let them know, listen, nobody should be touching you there. And as you stated, it's so much now, so many resources out there to help those who have been sexually assaulted. But now that you're able to come forth and talk about your story, in the beginning, how did you feel shame? Did you feel guilty of what happened to you?
Oh, I did. What I didn't realize, and this is until much later, that I developed ways of blocking it. And that's the beginning of what you're looking at, symptoms of PTSD, when you're able to create this tunnel vision, if you will, to compartmentalize the experience. But yet, if you're triggered by something, you'll flip out. For instance, my sophomore year in high school, um, this young man, he was Jamaican, and they're known for being aggressive. That's part of the culture. And when you tell them, I don't like you like that, they take offense. So because I said it to him in that manner, he wanted to physically fight me. And I snapped. I tackled him like I was a wide receiver. And on the defensive line at the same time, I tackled him in the hallway. And before I knew it, I felt two hands on my shoulders and I heard the words, "Davidson, get up." And I said, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble."
But good for you.
That's
Good,
right.
good
And
for you.
he took me into his office. And what was really cool is that I had about a third of the football team who were coming out of their lockers from practice. They saw everything and they were able to be my witnesses. They know he attacked her. And the principal, instead of getting me suspended or anything like that, the other guy was placed on out of school suspension for 3 days. And I was told by my assistant principal as well as the principal at the time. He said, if you ever get into any kind of trouble like this again, you don't have to handle it yourself. You come to me. You don't have to take this on by yourself. And that was something that stuck with me at 15, 16 years old, because you don't hear that from
Mm.
authority. You don't have to face it alone. You don't have to deal with this by yourself. You come to me. And, kudos to the football team for even speaking up and saying, no, she was attacked. Most men would not have done that.
So, and we're gonna say kudos to each one of them. So, Don, I have a question for you. It's always good to have males on our show. When we're doing these interviews, we know that you lost your niece Tina through domestic violence, and we know that you're spreading awareness every chance that you get. So, my question to you is,
Well,
um,
well, let me talk a
as-
little. Let me talk a little bit about the sexual abuse section here. Okay, let's get
okay,
into that real quick. First off, I don't think you know, or you, Miss Lori, know that both of my daughters. My daughter was 2 years old, and she was molested by her grandfather. My other daughter would have been 7 years old, molested by the same grandfather. So, do I know about sexual abuse? Yes, a lot about it. I was a police officer at the time. It was in 1981. So, as a father, to listen to you tell your story, and to have people step up for you, that's in your family to step up. It's amazing. I almost took the guy's life. I'm not going to lie about it. I I took my service revolver. Um, the only thing that stopped me from shooting him was my brother stepped between me and him. I was a law enforcement officer, so to understand that aspect of it, this was in the 80s, early 80s, and the family members, my ex-wife, she protected the person that did this, and so often that happens when it comes to family members. Family members hide it because they don't want their family member to be thrown into the public's eyes, and it's unfortunate. And the unfortunate part about this, and this part of it goes with domestic violence and child sexual abuse, is we can do better. We can bring education to our schools, as you were talking about. That's what I advocate for. I don't just advocate for domestic violence laws. I advocate to bring education, bring it into our schools, to give our children a safe place to say, hey, my uncle touched me inappropriately, or that this happened to me. See, that didn't exist, and it didn't exist for you, Miss Story, and I apologize. Back in society, back I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, so I can speak of it. It was a taboo thing you just didn't speak about. So when this happened to you, society wouldn't have accepted it. It's just the way it was, and people had to take these things into their own hands. My brother's girlfriend was raped. It was trying, but you don't think that the all of his friends got together and took care of the problem at hand. That's how we had to do it. That's the wrong way to take care of this. We need to take care of it the right way, to hold these perpetrators accountable, to register them. You say sex offense, you know what? They register sex offenders. When it comes to domestic violence, they don't consider sexual abuse in a lot of states. When it comes to domestic violence,
Mhm.
spousal rape is sexual violence. Yes, it is. But these perpetrators aren't held accountable. Oh, it's my wife. And the judges say you were married him. You know what? Bullshit. I'm sorry, and I shouldn't swear on here, but I hold it near and dear because it hurts. It hurts a lot when you relive, and I relived my children going through that. And like I said, being in law enforcement, it was a tough thing to deal with. What can I do? What can we do to change the laws? At the time that this happened to my children, and I'll make it short. We had our state didn't Washington State where I live. My ex-wife took my children and went clear to Ohio, clear across the country, and took the kids away. I didn't know where she went, had no idea. And she would call me after this incident happened. And she actually took them from state's custody when I was on my way to retrieve them. She kind of took them out of a visit. Anyways, doesn't make a difference how it happened. But it was hell. It was hell. And she protected this man. Fortunately, he was found guilty and he worked for the federal government, lost his job, and passed away 6 months after the incident it took place. So God took him in his hands and he took it in his hands anyway. But so often, we don't give children a safe place to talk about it. We don't. My 7-year-old daughter knew better, but she was afraid. And we've got to do that. We've got to open our ears up. We've got to open our eyes up, and we've got to listen to our children. And we're not doing that as a society, and it sucks. It does. We don't do that as a society. When a child goes to school and says, my mama got beat up last night, or
Mhm.
vice versa, my daddy got beat up. It's not a one-way street. But we forget about the little victims that are involved in this too. And my heart goes out to all of them. And God knows that this coronavirus stuff that's going on right now is taking a toll. It's taking a
Mhm.
toll. It's taking a toll on this nation this year. It's taking a toll on sexual violence, domestic violence, and God knows, when this pandemic's over with and we get some sort of normalcy, because I talk to prosecutors' office all the time, and with lawmakers in King County, Seattle, Washington alone, homicides have tripled. Their phones are 92% of all calls are domestic violence calls, sexual assault calls, anything related to family violence is 92% of their calls. It's escalated. We've got a pandemic within a pandemic, and it's heartbreaking. And hopefully, hopefully we can do better, and hopefully we can get education into these schools and educate our children and give them that safe avenue, a safe avenue. And I'm not talking law enforcement. I'm talking counselors do,
Mhm.
that they deserve. Somebody that knows what they're going through. Victims that have gone through it, like you, Miss Lori, that have gone through it. They need to be the people they're talking to these children because they've lived this. They've known what these guys do and what these people do and how they can play you and stuff. They understand it. The victims should be the ones educating our children about this. My feelings. And that's what I advocate for. Yes, I lost my niece, Tina Stewart, to domestic violence. That's what I advocate for, that law to hold these perpetrators accountable. She was beat to death. The monster got 16 years in prison. He'll be out in 11. My little great niece, she'll never be the same. Our life has changed forever, along with my grandkids and my great nephew. They lived with her at the time. They seen the violence, and again, no place to them to talk about it. They're threatened every day, and just as you probably were in the sexual violence cases, your victims are they're not they're scared. Okay, they're scared, they're ashamed, they're scared, they feel, you tell on, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your family. This is the kind of crap that goes on when you have sexual violence in a home. They tell their victim this, and then of course, you wanted to bring up victim shaming. I know that was one of your topics. Then you
Mhm.
got the family members victim shaming the victim. My God,
Mhm.
why the hell are you victim shaming a victim that just went through pure, you know what is going on? Oh, sorry. That's not the call I'm waiting for. I'm sorry. I text you about what's going on in my life right now,
Right.
and it's unfortunate that we're about to lose a family member. But it's so just bear with me if I get a call and I have to go. I have to go. And to your viewers, please understand that we have a lot going on right now in our life. But I thought this is an important topic. And, being a parent of two children that were sexually abused, by a paternal grandfather, I can totally understand. And unfortunately, during that time, and he worked for the Trident Nuclear Sub Division out of Seattle, Washington, the federal government protected him. He was protected, but God didn't protect him. And, that's the thing, he got what he deserved. He got what he deserved, and he passed away of a massive heart attack. And thank God it happened. No secrets got out. He No more children got hurt, and
Right.
all the girls that lived with him, he was a foster parent. This is another thing. He was a foster parent, and foster parents are doing this to the victims too. And him and his wife both were foster parents in the state of Washington. They were taking these children in and molesting them, and you know, again, as a
So
society, go
don't,
ahead.
we don't know how many he has molested, or did, like, once your daughter came forth, did any other ones come forth?
Oh yeah, he had so many. They had like three foster girls, and all three of them came forward and gave testimony during the case. But he was during the trial was when he passed away, so he was never really found guilty. But he died during the trial, and yeah, his own daughter and step foster daughters all came forward, and they too said the same story. They had been molested over the years by him also. So yeah, it came out, and it was tough. I mean, to have to and talking about this again, of course, you're reliving it, and and reliving it again, but it was a lot of years ago. But I got a hold of our state representative, because Washington State, when my ex-wife kidnapped our kids, we didn't have felony laws. It was a misdemeanor for a parent to kidnap their child and take them across state line, and move them to wherever they wanted to, and that's what she did to protect this guy. And fortunately, I'm a stubborn bull. I'm a Taurus, and just like with Tina's law, I don't give up. I keep pushing forward because that's what I have to do. I push forward, and being that my credentials as a police officer, I got the ear of a legislature in the state of Washington back then, and he heard my cries, and we changed child abduction in the state of Washington, parental abduction, into a felony offense. No parent can leave the state of Washington if the court papers and you have custody, because I had custody and she took them to protect his ass. And unfortunately, there was nothing that stopped her, but we fixed that. So now in the state of Washington, thanks to what happened to my children, um, no parent will ever have to suffer like that again. We fixed that law, and just as I intend to do with Tina's law, to hold these perpetrators accountable, because our state out here, if I don't get our legislative body and our Senate involved in this, and your viewers out there, all across this country, and hope maybe I'll get on Sirius XM again and talk to the nation again and the world again. But we have laws on the books out here. We have a 46th law that gives us a right to do research. We can contact our local courts, our prosecutors' offices, and we can ask for convictions. Any person that is convicted of domestic violence or child abuse or sexual rape or whatever, you can get that information. And it's public knowledge, and you can create your own registry. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm working on right now, is compiling my own registry to hold these people accountable. I mean, how many more Tina Stewarts need to die? And Jamie Bradshaw's, the list goes on up here, Jessica Musson. I mean, these are families that I've reached out to, that I'm real good friends with, that, and who knows what went on behind closed doors. Victims of domestic violence don't talk about their sexual abuse.
Right.
Never until they're out of the relationship. And who knows, and it's unfortunate. And like I said, we as a society can do better. And they talk about defunding police departments, and people, you hear that all the time. That isn't what I think they're talking about. I think it's what we need to do is restructure these police departments. We need to have we need to have counselors on hand 24/7 a day, 24/7 on payroll. You get called out, you get paid. Just like if you're a fireman or anybody else, you go on that call. You be out there for mental health issues. Right now, we have a mental health issue that's an epidemic in itself in the
Mhm.
United States. We have murder suicide rates up. We have
Right.
veterans killing themselves at 22 to 25 veterans a day. We have murder suicides up with domestic violence cases. Not only the victim and the perpetrators themselves, but they're killing the little innocent children. We have that going on in the United States. We can do better, and it's our job to do it. We have to stand up. Everybody has to stand up. We've got sex trafficking that's going rampant,
Mhm.
and I blame social media for this. I'm not going to lie to you. I blame a lot of this on social media. You get little kids getting on there, and just like the conspiracy and all the crud that's gone on social media with our elections. But I see little kids getting on there and posting. I know, because I had to get on my own niece about it. She's 12 years old and posting a explicit picture of herself on social media. You don't think
Right.
perpetrators see that crap? Yeah, they do. We need to
And
hold them.
that's another thing, like with the human trafficking, that leads to so much sexual abuse. And a lot of times,
It
I'm
is sexual
against
abuse.
children. Yeah, I'm against children being on TikTok, um,
Oh, yeah.
Twitter, Snapchat. I'm totally against that. And parents don't understand, and sometimes, dressing your children to look, nobody has a right to touch you. But
No.
sometimes as a parent, we have a responsibility to make our children look like children. You
Yeah.
know, there are perpetrators out here. They will, and that's why it's so important, like with the Fortnite games and the different games, pay attention. People are walking out, not paying attention to their children, and these people are luring them, trying to find out their addresses, taking your children and harming your children sexually, making them into doing the sex trades and different things like that. That's why these roundtables are so important, to talk about things that nobody really want to talk about.
Oh, they don't want to talk
And
about this. People don't want to talk about it. They're blind to it because they're, I use it. I use the term as ignorance, and ignorance is no excuse. But you know what? People turn their blinders on. It doesn't affect them. It's not in my household. But you know what? Yeah, you better open your eyes because the dang sure. Guess what? It probably is in your household. You're just not seeing it. My God, turn on a child's phone, iPhone sometime, and take a look. They got security places they go in there. They could go in different directions. My I talked to my niece about it because it was my great niece that was posting these pictures at 12 years old. I said, "Hey," and I called my great niece out on this, and I called her mom, and her mom called her at home and said, "Well, when I get home, we're deleting everything." And her mom couldn't find the damn video that she posted. And I said, "Well, I have it. You know what? I have it. And you know what? It's on there. So I don't know where." And her mom found out and blocked her phone, put a security thing on and they can track it. But,
mhm,
you can't do that. I mean, but again, it's, you got stalkers out there. You got perpetrators out there that live for this. They live for it every day. They live for the fact that, oh, a poor woman is in trouble. Man, I can be your knight in shining armor. No, they're
right.
stalking you. They're
Mhm,
using you. They're going to take advantage. And you know what? These little children out there, they don't know any better. They get on social media and you get people on there that are just predators. That's what they are, predators.
mhm,
And it's unfortunate. And then they become, yeah, then they become victims of that, the sex trade and stuff like that. And it's heartbreaking. And again, I blame a lot of this on us as society. We don't do more about it, and we have to do more about it. You know, if we don't start holding these guys accountable that are out here doing, here's my thing with what I'm trying to do, and with Tina's laws, a national violent offenders registry. My ultimate goal is to have a United States national offenders registry that is free to every citizen of the United States. If they're sitting in a restaurant with somebody and they come up and say their name, hey, unfortunately, maybe we have to ask for ID. But if it comes to that, it comes to that for your safety. So what? If it saves your life and you see the guy's name on there, the girl's name on there, you wouldn't go out on a date with them. Not only that, but then you keep the guns out of the hands of the violent offenders out there on the streets,
mhm.
because now you can't go to Walmart parking lot and purchase a gun because you just beat up your wife last week, because now you're sitting on that registry, so you're not getting a gun, and these guys not going to sell you a gun because he sees you on there. It's a no-brainer. But people say, "Oh, well, that's infringing on people's rights." What rights do they have? They made the choice to abuse
Right.
that child. They made the choice to beat up that woman or that man. They made the choice to kill this person. They made the choice to rob a bank. They're the violent offenders. You know what? We're locking drug offenders up and we're not putting the violent offenders in jail. I mean, like I said, I have a friend of mine that's doing 26 years to life in prison for selling a bag of dope. Well, he didn't even sell it. He just talked to federal agents about selling it to him, and he's doing 26 to life. Yet I have the guy that murdered my niece, Nicholas Holden, sitting. He's going to sit 11 years in a state prison and walk
And
free,
walk free.
to do it to somebody else. You know, there's something wrong with our justice system. We need reform in that, and hopefully it's coming. I don't know. I don't know, but I know this, that we've got to educate our children. And you started this show off by saying something: healthy relationships. Healthy
Yes.
relationships. My God, they don't know any better. They're seeing their parent or something going on to a sibling, and they think it's normal.
Right.
Unfortunately, and sexual abuse too. And they think, hey, that's normal. So they're, think about it. It's a trade. We got to break that cycle. And if we don't break it, it's never going to get broke. And this is our time. I said 2020, and look what happened. The coronavirus came in. I mean, we had so much momentum until this happened. And we've had, I've got 9 family members. And right now, last 3 months, almost every month, we've had people in ICU, and one might not make it as we speak right now, just waiting on that call. So it's heartbreaking, but we've had 9 survive it and no problem. So we're just going to keep on hoping that this antidote, this virus vaccine gets out to enough people that they don't have to worry about it anymore. But I'm just, it's heartbreaking.
Oh, I agree. It
Oh
has
God.
definitely been a trying year. And, just something that I wanted to piggyback off of that you mentioned, Don, in
Yeah.
terms of how family members hide
Yeah.
the cycle. It is very evident, even more prevalent within African American
You're
communities,
right.
that we
Mhm.
will sweep it under the rug and not even identify it. Because I will share this with you as well. At 19, I was assaulted
Yeah.
by my uncle, and I did not tell my grandmother because my
And
grandmother
she would
is
have
very
blamed you.
old school. She Yeah, very much so. Now, my mother what did not know at the time. I'm glad she didn't, because she probably would have shot my uncle. My mom was pretty nifty with a handgun. Um, but I do remember the discussion at the time being, what were you
Yep.
wearing?
Oh God, I was going to say that
Oh,
earlier. I didn't want it.
What were you
Yeah.
wearing?
Oh.
What did you do to entice
Yeah.
him? And I felt more vulgar by the question than I did the actual experience, because I really had like this head tilt moment, like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm your grandchild and you're asking me what did I wear? It's almost as if you're talking to me like I'm some hoe, like I'm a straight up prostitute.
Yeah.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
it caused further dissension within the family. My uncle was also high on cocaine at the time. So he delved further into his drug usage. But it came out about 10 years later when he actually called out of the blue to apologize to me, which is rare. You
Mm,
never have a perpetrator apologize to their victim. And this was the first for me. And he once he apologized, he said, I'm going to share this with you that I have never mentioned before, and that is, it happened to me when I was 9 years old by
mm,
my mother. And it wasn't that she physically touched me, she asked me to help her release with objects.
Wow.
mm.
A 9-year-old boy.
Seeing so often though, and we, like again, but this has gone
And the
back.
funny thing about that is my mother had always made this weird observation and said, Mom, when it comes to your boys, you have this very strange relationship, but she could never pinpoint it.
Wow. Oh,
Did you ever, Midori, once your uncle revealed that to you, did you ever say anything to your mom about it?
Um, so with the history of my mother, and this ties in with domestic violence. My mother disappeared when I was 14 years old. She was involved with a man in Mississippi who was a well-known drug dealer. And the last time I heard from her was the night of my 8th grade graduation. That summer, I heard nothing. I was supposed to go and visit her, and my father and I didn't hear anything. That fall, my great aunt passed, and my mother wasn't at the funeral, so I knew something was wrong. My grandmother goes to file a report, a missing persons report. The officer takes her information, writes it on a piece of notebook paper, and leaves it there. My mother was never placed on a missing persons report. So, as Don was saying, the laws need to be changed about getting perpetrators out there. The laws need to even be enforced about how women are reported. Because one thing that I have noticed in my experience, a woman of color is not as urgent as a white woman when it comes to reporting. A woman of poor economic stature versus one who is in the upper echelon of economics, they are not reported in the same fashion.
Well, it goes like this, and this is actually statistics. Indigent women, Indian women,
Yeah,
they're the most common to disappear, and they're never found. We have them
that is very true. And
and
African
and it's African American fall right in there the
American,
second, and it's true. And the thing is in law enforcement don't take it
no,
seriously. They
they
don't take missing people seriously, and it's just, again, and I'm a white man talking. I'm 62 years old. I'm a Marine. I mean, I was a police officer. But one thing I do believe in, that we're all equal. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all God's children. We all bleed blood. Our blood's red. All of us are equal, and it's sad that society doesn't look at people that way. And what do you think we're in such a mess we're in right now with all the
Right.
systematic racism and stuff in America? I mean, my God, we got it's happening everywhere, and unfortunately, it's just the way that people portray people, and it's wrong. It's so wrong in so many ways, and we've got to be treated equal. We have to be treated with the same respect and the same dignity that we did. You know what? Like I said, I'm 62 years old. I grew up during the 60s when there was racial divide. I mean, when you segregation of bathrooms and stuff like that. I remember it. I remember when Martin Luther King got killed. I remember when John F. Kennedy got killed. These things I grew up with. And we're falling back into that same situation again today. And if we don't address these issues right now, you know, domestic violence and sexual assault and stuff like that's just the tip of the iceberg that's going on. And seriously, I mean, it is, and it's wrong, and we've got to address all these issues. And fortunately, we've got to have people that want to stand up and speak up. And if they do that, the more and more we can get to do that, the more we're going to be heard. But it's because you get silenced so much, and I mean, Facebook censors me so much. It's like I don't even want to go on Facebook anymore because I'm always being censored, and the negativity on Facebook. To be honest with you, really, the false information and all the negativity and all the hatred and stuff. It just got to me where, during all this time of death that's going on in America, why are we acting like this against each other? We should be uniting more than ever and holding
Mhm.
each other up and praying for one another and doing what's right, and trying to get through this virus together as one nation, one world, and it's not happening. And I don't know if you guys followed the news, but today, there was breaking news that 246 more school children were kidnapped in Nigeria by the Boko Haram. And they're being,
yes,
yeah, that,
yes.
and that, here we are again, and we're the world's power. We should be, and I know we can't protect everybody, but we can lead by example, and we can. And
But
one,
it's interesting that you bring up the Boko Haram because when they were doing this before, we stepped in to try and interject policy or at least help
Oh,
with
mhm.
yeah,
rescuing some of those victims. And there was bureaucratic red tape even there.
yeah,
So it's a lot bigger than what we are able to visualize
yeah,
because behind those horrific acts, guess what's involved? Money.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Money. I was recently in a conference over the summer, and it was a global summit on sex trafficking and sexual violence. And I met women from Ireland to St. Louis, and they each told me my grandparents or my parents put me into prostitution. They sold me.
Mm.
They sold me because they were alcoholics and we had no money coming in. So I was made to be a breadwinner laying down. And they were 12 years of age.
Yeah.
And when I saw this in Oakland, when I went home to bury one of my uncles, I saw this in Oakland.
You're from
Right there
Oakland,
on
California.
Telegraph
Sorry.
Avenue, these young little girls, black and Hispanic, in these tight apple bottom jeans and goo gobs of makeup, and they could not have been no more than 12.
Jesus Christ.
And you're trying to pose like you're going to school. Sweetheart, you're not going to school, not looking like that. And what grossed me out more were the people getting on the bus, and they know what they're looking at. Are you
Mm-hmm.
that immune? You're not even helping these little girls. You're not even saying to the bus driver, halt this bus and call the cops.
Again, they put the blinders on. Nobody, it doesn't.
Yeah. It
It's
took
sad,
an
and
it took an undercover cop to bust that operation up. And she almost died doing that. Her story was in Essence magazine. I mean, it was a huge operation that was underlying, underground. Nobody knew.
well, it's unfortunate, but that story is not. It's not just in Oakland,
Oh
California. I
no,
mean,
it's
this is in
everywhere.
Chicago,
It's
Everywhere.
Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. It's from
Indianapolis.
Oakland, California
Used
to the reservations of the Navajo. It's
everywhere.
everywhere.
You know,
Everywhere. And it just amazed me that I was meeting women across the globe who were put into prostitution at such a young age.
they were children, and they
And they were
never had the.
children and they were sold into prostitution.
And they wonder why you got a problem. You can just.
Exactly. And then
Right.
they have, even with transitioning back into civilian life, because once again, when you're facing those kinds of traumas at such a young age, you now are a soldier. And when you come out of combat, you're going to have symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder. I do. So these women and we talked about that. And one of the things that they said was it was so hard to do something as simple as fill out a job application. They couldn't focus. And I knew the feeling because when I broke free from my abuser, going back to work was mentally difficult. I remember being afraid to go register to vote. I was shaking. And then people ask how come victims or even survivors of sexual violence and domestic violence, why don't they register to vote? Hello, it's called protection.
Protection. Mm-hmm.
Because when you registered me, guess what you do? You publish my information. So someone
Mm-hmm.
could Google my name and find me. So it goes
I
back
guess
to
that.
what you were saying, Don. These policies have to be reevaluated. They have to be challenged. We have to stand up and challenge them. And we have to make sure that there's follow through. Because here I am looking for my mother 34 years later.
Wow.
And nothing because she was never put on a missing persons report. My grandmother assumed the job was done. It never began. And it's so interesting that we even talk about this because Netflix has an awesome documentary and it's based on a book by John Grisham called The Innocent Man. And these two women, they were murdered in Ada, Oklahoma, one in 1982, the other in 1984, by two different men. They're from the same town, but behind the scenes, these innocent people were sent to prison. Meanwhile, the real killers were walking the streets. Why? Because they were in cahoots with law enforcement at the local prison system who had a drug and prostitution ring.
Wow.
Wow.
So yeah, this documentary is deep. It took Ada, Oklahoma almost 30 years to solve these women's murders, as well as get the innocent people out of jail. And every interview in that documentary, everybody said, if you have money in Ada, you're great. But if you're poor, you're in trouble.
Wow. That's why, honestly, I know, Medora, you asked me what made me start doing these interviews. It's the information to get out, especially during with COVID-19 hitting. It's hard to be out in the street, spreading awareness. But everybody is home. You know, everybody's home. On Facebook. Everybody's on YouTube. Everybody's, social media is just taking so much control. So it's easier to spread the awareness this way. My heart goes out to both of you. I remember when I first wrote my book, it's called Pain of Powerful. And it's about cousins who live with the grandparents. And um, one of the older cousins was coming home, coming to the grandparents' house, to save money going to college. But he befriended both girls and ended up getting them both pregnant. He didn't
Lord
want
have
anybody
mercy.
else around them. And I just couldn't understand. I'm like, okay, God, you want me to write this? And, all the twists and the turns that, God had laid on me to write the book, to help spread awareness. But what it boiled down to, the grandmother had been sexually assaulted, went through domestic violence and tried to push it all in the back, and never deal with the surface. And
Mm-hmm.
the grandfather was like this knight in shining armor. He finds her in the alley, and he kept contact, contacted her family, he just kept contact, and so they end up getting married. But he didn't realize like all the baggage,
Mm.
that she had been hiding. And the girls, they began to separate, not want to be friends anymore. The grandparents see this and is like, what's going on? But that cousin, he was like, their go-to person, pretty much. But long story short, one of the aunts find out and she plotted and killed him, in the book or whatever. She was like, I'm gonna ride for this. He can't keep doing this or whatever. And so it caused like a confusion in that family. But they end up, and that's why the book is called Pain of Powerful, because all the pain that the family had went through, they ended up pulling together, to spread awareness. And so I said that to say this is a lot of times we don't want to address what's going on in our homes. We don't want to address the surface of things that has happened. And so we'll keep pushing it under the rug, pushing it under the rug. And in our community, we're taught what goes on in our household stays in our household. Um,
Yes.
which I hate that statement.
Which does a disservice, absolutely,
Right.
because it teaches the child at an early age to suppress. And then to
Mhm.
add to that, keeping in mind the era that I grew up in, which was mid to late 70s to the 80s, throughout the 80s. I was a teenager in the 80s. So back then, if there was any report of any kind of abuse, rather than seek out what's best for the child, you would take the child and you would either put them in foster care or put them in a group home situation, making them children of the state. And let's be real and honest, there's money behind that too,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
because
worked
these
in
group
mental health
homes
for a
get
long time.
money and foster parents get money. But is that best for the child? Because I temporarily lived in a group home situation. And I remember a young little girl, her name was Lisa. She had been in that group home since she was a baby, didn't know who her mother and father was, but they would beat her, They would pick on her, antagonize her. And it got to the point where me only being 10 years old, I stood up for her. I had to get in the middle sometimes. Like, no, you're not going to hit her. I got her. Don't you touch her. And it was odd to see a child do that. So the other kids realized, oh, I could speak up too. I have rights.
Hmm.
You
And I
know?
worked in mental health for 10. I just came out. Um, and it's touching, and I'm just gonna call it the way it is. When someone has dealt with sexual assault, they're placed in a group homes. They're just another number. You're 8 to 5,
Yes,
a 5 to 12, or a 12 to 7. I
that's
mean,
right.
however that shift works. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're not trained on how to really care for that person with the trauma they've been through. They're
Exactly.
just told,
Well, first off,
um,
they're not trained for it. I mean, they're not.
right.
They're
And then, secondly, let's look at their file. How is this child being reported? Are they being reported as a child coming from an abusive home? Or are they being reported as a child coming from a negligent home? Are
yeah.
all the facts in the file?
And so, like, to keep it real, like when they're reporting, you have their story, you have the parent story,
And then
and you
there's the
have the
truth.
state story. What
Mm-hmm.
they, but nobody has the fourth story, which is the truth. You know what I
That's
mean?
right. That's
Like,
right.
and it's only so much that they can give that staff. But then when you walk in, and so when you walk in and they're pleasing themselves, you're like, oh my gosh, they
Yes.
handicapped,
Yes.
or they have a disability. But at the same token, what happened prior to them being placed in this situation? We
Exactly.
can deal with, we're trained, we was trained on how to give them medications, how to deal with the mental part of it, but
Mm-hmm.
we wasn't trained to deal with the trauma that
That's
truly
true.
caused them to be there.
And let's even talk about just the regular aspect of hormones and adolescence, because I used to work in a group home facility for with young men who were mentally disadvantaged. They had mental disabilities, and having discussions with some of the parents about girls, about social settings, it was like talking to rocks. Like, just because your son has Down syndrome, that doesn't mean he doesn't have feelings.
Right.
He
Right,
likes girls. It's okay. As
right,
long as you have it in a healthy setting, what's the problem with talking about a girl that he has a crush on? Why is it wrong to help your son write a letter, a healthy letter or card saying, "Hey, I like you. Do you like me too? The girl also has Down syndrome. What harm is it?" But with these parents, it was like talking to a brick wall. So this is in a community where you have children with mental disabilities. So can you imagine within a quote unquote normal community?
right,
I
Absolutely
don't really think
unreal.
we have a normal community there
True,
because
we don't.
true.
there is so much. It's unfortunate, because we have a lot of opportunity. We do like I said earlier, as a society and as Americans, as a world, a global deal, and that's to start educating our children and tell them, it's not okay to hit one another. It's not okay to sexually abuse one another. It's not okay to bully one another. And if we can start with that, because listen, here's but sometimes when I'm doing domestic violence conversations and things about sexual violence and stuff, I say, this goes back to the caveman age. Think about it. If you go back and you start looking at history, Neanderthal and all this stuff, women were always the lesser of a person. That's not the way it should be. It never should have been that way. But even in some societies today, and I'm not, overseas, women are degraded and they're the lesser of a human being. And that's just the norms of their society. It's not right. But, we've got to do better than this because, women and men are being sexually abused. Children are being
Mhm.
sexually abused every single minute of every single day. And if we don't step up to the plate and stop this now, this is not going to change, aspects. It's not going to get any better. It's only going to continue to get worse with social media, pornography, child pornography is rampant on social media. Really, what do you think they're using these girls they kidnap them from in Boko Haram, by the Boko Haram in Nigeria and stuff? They're putting out sexual pornography of child pornography, and the people out there are grasping this shit up and they're buying it up like you wouldn't believe, and it's so sad, and it's wrong. It's wrong, and we can fix these issues if we choose to. It's unfortunate that people just turn a blind eye. They turn a blind eye and say, "Oh, it didn't happen to me. It's okay." You know what? When it happens to your sibling, to your family member, is it okay then?
Mm-mm.
Why wait till then? Why wait till it's your child that gets molested by a neighbor? Why wait till it's your sister that got raped by the boys in the locker room at school? Why wait till then? Get involved now, people. Get involved now, and that's what they got to do. And if we keep talking about and having a conversation, yeah, we're having a conversation, but are we getting the answers to the problem? And that's something we got to look at. You know, we can have the conversation every day. It's not going to change the fact if we don't have, when Tina got murdered, I I decided instead of sitting back and doing nothing, I started being proactive in domestic violence issues. It's unfortunately that's just a measure that happens. Once it's happened to you, you react and you start because it's a reaction, and that's what I'm doing now is a reaction to something that should have never happened. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people do that after it happens to them, but they shouldn't. They should do it before. If we get involved now, we can stop this and we can start educating children the right way. And I believe that. And I think that's our answer to all these problems. And it's got to be done. I mean, this has got to be done. You were talking about statistics about girls and being raped before they were,
Mhm.
in their lifetime. Do you know that in high school, on average, right now, 1 in 7 girls report that they are a victim of domestic violence, sexually raped, or
Mhm.
sexually molested in high school by either a peer, a teacher, a friend, or a boyfriend, or whatever the case may be. 1 in 14 boys, before they ever graduate high school, report the same thing. These numbers are wrong. Do you know that they're already starting to get statistics in middle schools? In middle schools, these kids ain't even 13 years old yet, and they're already doing this. When do we start the education process? We start the education process in the grade school when they're most vulnerable and educate them. Because one thing that our children do know, they see everything and they hear everything.
Yes.
And women aren't, just because if they're being raped at home, that's domestic violence, but it's also sexual assault rape.
So, mhm.
And that's sexual assault rape. They said no, no means no. That's what it means. And too often, like I was saying earlier, they're overlooked as, oh, well, it was done by your husband, and cops just, oh, and the women don't want to push the issue, and they should push the issue because they are being raped. If you're told no, that's what it means. It means no.
And it don't matter again whether you're married, whether you're in a
Nope,
relationship.
nope,
It don't matter.
nope.
It just do not matter. If that person say no, no means exactly what it is. No means no. No, no. Um, if you ask and they decline, that's it. You can't just assume, well, with marriage, people feel like they have entitlement. I'm entitled to it. No,
Yeah,
you're not. If I say
yeah.
no, that means no. You're not entitled to anything. One of the viewers said how to educate without scaring people with too harsh judgments. People with abusive tendencies are probably scared of these areas in their psyche. Um, how to educate without scaring people.
How to educate without scaring people? Well, you're not scaring people. I mean, you're giving a child. I mean, first off, you're asking that question. I don't know if you're a victim or not, but a child sees everything and hears everything. A child goes to school. He knows his mom's being beat up or his dad's being beat up by the mom, because a lot of times this does happen. Women are abusers too, and or verbally abusive or whatever. A child can speak about that. We don't necessarily have to separate the family. We do that before it gets physical. If it's just verbal abuse, maybe we get some education in there for the family to help the family body. The problem is a lot of times we take and just push it all to the side for and don't do anything about it. And here's this child is suffering and asking, saying, "Hey, this is going on in my own home." There was an article about a year and a half ago. A 4-year-old child comes to a daycare, and this was a video that was shared with me by a parent, and was shared to me by a parent. And the 4-year-old went to a daycare center and beat on a 2-year-old kid. And when you seen the pictures of the 2-year-old that was shared with me, she was black and blue. Where did a 4-year-old learn that it was okay to beat up on another child like that? Obviously, it
Home.
it was at home. And we have to give these children a safe place to talk about this. If they come to school and they say, "This is going on in my home," we intervene now. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. It could be something that could be remedied. It could be a financial issue. It could be something maybe counseling would help. But before it gets to the physical point, because once it gets to that physical point, there is no turning back. If it gets to physical, it's not going to end well for the victim. Seriously, it's not. I mean, that's just not, and unfortunately, children are seeing this and they're seeing the sexual abuse and stuff that's going on in these homes. I mean, it's going on. Mm.
We was asked, I think these are well, one of our viewers stated, I think these are generational issues, like the other lady talked about with her uncle and grandmother. Some level of acceptance may be needed to bring it out to the open. Um,
Again, it's breaking that cycle. You know what? Why is the okay? Here's the thing: if nobody ever speaks about it, and a child grows up in a domestic violence home, a sexual abuse home, where they're being sexually abused, and they grow up and they become adults, they go to high school, they graduate, they go on to college, all of a sudden now they're abusers. Why? Just because they didn't get caught up in the red tape and never got, they're never, it never was mentioned. It still was learned in the home, and this has been continuing to go on, not just in my lifetime or in the last 100 years. This has been going on for generations and generations and generations and generations in the past. If we don't break that cycle of abuse that's going on, because I do believe in most cases that I've researched on, and even in these mass shootings that go on in America, go do the research. I do the research on this. All these mass shootings, 96% of these guys that do these shootings and stuff, first off, they're not black, they're white. They're in domestic violence or abusive relationship, or have been abused as a child. You can do the research, your viewers can do the research. I do the research so I can speak to this stuff. So, you know what? It is a generational thing, and it's a learned trait. How do you break that cycle? You educate the children. You educate
Mhm.
the children what a healthy relationship is. What happens to that? Now they know, hey, this isn't healthy. Let's bypass this and move on to the, what is healthy for me in my cycle, and let's break this vicious cycle. Sometimes this happens in generation to generation. Sometimes
Mhm.
a child does grow up in abusive relationship and says, I'm not going to be like that, or a sexual abusive relationship says, I'm not going to be like that, and it does happen. But unfortunately, 90% of the time, it doesn't happen. They go on to be abusers themselves. The guy that murdered my niece, he was in an abusive family. He grew up in an abusive family. Tina wasn't his first victim. It was the first victim he murdered.
Murder.
She was, but she wasn't his first victim. That's why I push for this registry so hard, is because they need to be known who they are and held
And it's
accountable.
important that when we see it, we recognize it and we break these generational curses. Um,
Yeah.
if as they was asking, these are generational issues. That was one of the things we talked about. We a lot of things are swept under the rug, so the generational curses are not called out. We make excuses for them. We accept the behavior and pretty much say, hey, don't do it anymore. you know um but now it's time out for that. If you do it, and I'm a firm believer, if you do the crime, you do the time. um we need stronger laws that's going to really force it, that's going to really push it. If someone comes to you and tell you they've been sexually assaulted, don't blame them. That's one of the things, like Midori was saying.
Oh, yeah.
She was asked, what did she wear? It does not matter what I
No.
have on. This is my body. It does not give you a right to touch it.
Yeah.
um, if you ask and I say no, that's exactly what it means. So we have to educate even at a young age.
Yeah.
Um, and and honestly, the children are seeing stuff at young ages, as you stated,
Oh,
Don.
yeah.
um for a 4-year-old to beat a 2-year-old, that means that it's so much going on at home. And that child feel that there's no safe haven, so they take their frustration out, as if they see at home how frustration is taken out. So that's why it's so important that we educate our children. Okay. And we set examples. If you don't want your child doing it, don't allow it to happen to you. Sometimes, and I'm not saying, because I am a survivor of domestic violence, I know it's not easy to just say, forget it, I'm gonna walk out. I know it's not that easy, because walking out don't just stop the abuse. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's the stalking. Sometimes it's like not even knowing their routine anymore, and you thinking that you're safe, and boom, here they appear, because you don't know their routine anymore. But they've been so busy stalking and watching you, and it kind of catches you off guard. So,
Well,
I
I'd, li- I'd like to comment on that you said about domestic violence. Um, Please, and I want to say this to all people out there: if you're a victim of domestic violence, if you are trying to make a choice and you're making a decision to leave this relationship, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to say this to you, and I hope you listen to me and you hear me strongly. During that time, do not tell your perpetrator you're leaving. Do not do you make a plan, and you make a safe plan, a safe exit plan. You are 500 times more likely to die, to be murdered at the time that you leave that relationship than you are staying in that relationship. And I just want to make sure I get that out there to people, because that is the worst time in a domestic violence relationship ever for a victim, is when they decide to leave. They're, the statistics are just alarming. And if there's a gun in the house, most of the time, that's where you'll be killed with the gun. And that happens. So please make sure you make a safe exit plan. Don't tell anybody. I mean, maybe your closest friend, because you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how these perpetrators are able to coerce your own friends to tell them your secrets, and they will. They
It's-
play the victim, and it happens all the time.
I,
I couldn't agree
yes,
more.
and
Couldn't agree
I was,
more. Definitely have a safety net. Have a backup plan to the backup plan. I know that's what I had to do when I escaped. I hid money
Yeah,
in places that he would never look to find, like
mhm,
shampoo bottles, um, behind meat in the freezer because he didn't cook. So yeah, I had to get clever too and outthink and outsmart him.
yeah,
Um, you not only to thine own self be true, but you have to know who you're dealing with too and be realistic.
yeah,
yes. Also,
Absolutely.
also begin to if you're developing a safety plan, make sure you get your important documents. If you have children,
Yes.
if you just yourself, make sure you have your social security card, your birth certificate, anything that is of importance to who you are. um Make sure you have that. um One of the things, I mean, we're giving you sound advice. Take clothes. Sometimes you have to take them and stuff from here, there, and everywhere. To people's house. They may think you crazy. Hey, girl, you left the bag. Oh, okay. Really, they don't even know that you're, planning your escape. But you have to do what you got to do. Even if it's that day you going through picking up your bags from here, there, and everywhere. Because so many times we leave with just what's on our back.
yeah.
And
Um,
even if you need to call for help, be clever in how you call.
yes.
Um, act like you're ordering a pizza.
Hmm.
With DoorDash and everything that's going on, you can call DoorDash. You can call Grubhub as well as 911 and use the same lingo. I'd like to order a pizza, but I don't need it delivered right this second because the situation is not apropos. Someone at the other end has a trained ear to decipher what it is you're trying to say. There's also apps on your smartphone, such as Georgia Smiles. And that app, when you look at it, it shows you the news, but it detects your trouble rate by the pulse of your finger.
Mm.
So it connects to 911, it connects to a hotline. So
You know,
technology is becoming very useful in detecting trouble.
yeah. The problem is a lot of times, though, a victim can't get to their phone and stuff,
Absolutely.
and
And
we've
when you
got
can't
to.
get to your phone, it goes back to what you all were saying earlier, be clever. I even had my friends break into my apartment to get my important documents because I had to hurry up and go.
Yeah,
So my friends crouched in their car. They waited till everybody left the parking lot, and Lord knows they waited a long time. And they were acting as though they were thieves in the night. They pried open my window, and it's funny now because these my friends who were doing this, complete nerds. Like these are total intellectuals, and here you are with black beanies and hoodies.
oh my God.
Trying. All right, y'all. Let's see if we can do this with the window.
You know what's really funny about that story though is they were friends of yours enough to do that for you, to stick up
Yes.
for
Mhm.
you, to protect you, and to do what they
Yes.
had to do to help you. And those are the people you want around you during the time of need.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, those are the
Absolutely.
it just
Surround yourself with a support system who
don't
is
trust your
tighter than
family.
saran wrap.
And I'm telling
You
you,
can't
people,
trust your family
you
when you're
know,
leaving.
if you're
No,
if you're
Those
in a
are the
narcissist,
ones that will be bought the quickest.
yeah.
absolutely.
It's sad, but it's the truth. Your family will be bought.
Especially if they're already blaming you, don't trust them because
Yeah.
they're gonna take the perpetrator's side. If they're
Yeah.
already blaming you for this, if that becomes back to the victim blaming, if they're blaming you for what's going on with you and knowing that you're being abused, they're taking the narcissistic side, and that
Absolutely.
unfortunately it happens way too often. And because these guys know, and the women too, they know how to play the family where, I'm to being the victim. I was just protecting myself, or, I didn't mean to do it, and I'm so sorry, and the family falls for it. And it's just because they're the breadwinner or whatever the case may be. And it's so common that it's heartbreaking, but it's so common. And, it takes a lot for the family to come back, and you victims out there, if you're not, you don't know if you're a victim of domestic violence or even sexual violence, and think about what we're saying. If you say no, that means no. If you're sexually abused after that, you're a victim of sexual abuse. If you're being isolated and financially destitute and told who you can hang around with, and told what you can do and what you can wear,
Mhm.
you are becoming a victim of domestic violence controlled by a narcissist. Okay, and I'm speaking to you people out there. You got to understand these things, because so often you don't even realize that you are a victim until it's too late, and the physical part starts. And that's when it's too late, because once that happens, they've already got control of your mind, they've got control of you, they have taught you to be what they want you to be, and they know that they put the fear into you to be that person. And unfortunately, that is so common that you don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. So, always look up the red flags about it, and look up the description of a narcissist, and look up how they control and what they do to people. And and I guess it's a form of brainwashing. Medora, I guess that's what it is, isn't it? I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, both of you been victims of domestic violence. I don't know the extreme of what you went through, but I understand it, you know,
Oh, the manipulation is nothing but brainwashing.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because in order for them to control you, they have to dumb you down first.
How
Mhm.
long were you, how long were each of you in a domestic violence relationship? Can I ask you that? How
What's
long
that?
I
was your
stayed in
relationship?
mine for 10 years.
10 years? Medora, how long were
Yeah, it's a
you
little
in?
staticky.
Oh, I
Oh
said,
no, here we go.
how long were you in how long were you in a domestic violence relationship?
How long
Yeah.
was it for me?
Yeah.
So I left my abuser. It's been 15 years now.
Yeah. The thing is,
It's been
how
15
many
years.
times did you think about leaving? Either one of you. How
Oh,
many
I thought
times?
about it.
For me,
The first time he
I
punched me through my
left.
wall.
Huh?
Midori, something's going on with your phone. For me, I left
Yeah,
several
I'm seeing
times.
that.
And you went back. On the average time that a victim of domestic violence, sexual assault will go back to their perpetrator, on average between 7 and 14 times before they finally
Mhm.
leave. And most of the time, it's because they ended up in the hospital. And even then, sometimes they don't leave the relationship, even if they're in the hospital. They don't.
I actually lost my son through domestic violence, and I still went back.
Isn't that crazy? What the human mind, but how it can be controlled, on how you become the person that it was your fault, and you believe that
Right.
and and yet you don't even realize, no, it wasn't. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's too common amongst everybody, and same with sexual abuse. They become numb to it, that it's normalcy, and
Mhm.
and they just they learn to live with it. And unfortunately, sometimes this can happen up until, from the time they're a child, a baby, until they're coming to their 20s, and they finally realize that they've been a victim of sexual abuse all their life, and not never really realized it, because it
Right.
was normal to them. You know,
And
yeah,
back in the days growing up, nobody really had a name for anything. I remember even when I was going through domestic violence with my first husband, and when the deputies would come out and they would give me brochures,
yeah.
I was like, why do they keep leaving all this paper? I don't want to deal with those people, da da da, whatever. I was already going through enough. Um, Looking in the mirror, seeing the bruises. It was like, why do I want to go talk to somebody? Why do I want to tell them my business? They're going to constantly ask me the same questions.
And they
But
ain't
what,
gonna do nothing anyway.
right. But now, one thing I can say, and I can honestly say this with everything on the inside, even though I was not educated on what was going on, the deputies from Pitt County Sheriff Department, when they came out, they did not just treat me like anybody else. And when I tell you, they came out to my house every other night. You
Wow.
know, it was two officers that constantly begged me to leave. Just leave with your life. Just leave. You know, call these people. They were constantly giving me the pamphlets. Call these people. Call these people. I didn't want to talk to them. I would go to court, and when I would have my ex-husband locked up, he will constantly call. Well,
Yeah.
the bills are gonna come. This is gonna happen. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be right there. Um, you know, I didn't mean it. You made me mad, or whatever. So I began
Yeah.
to think that all of this was my fault. Um, even just not even in that, relationship. I remember times like, even in other relationships that I went through abuse, just feeling like I was nobody,
You
it was
deserved
if
it.
I didn't have such a slick mouth, if I didn't say anything back, maybe I could have the situation could de-escalate it, or I should have been the one to de-escalate the problem, not um continue to go back and forth. But then now being educated, it didn't matter. It was in them. It was gonna happen anyway. I
Yeah.
remember times even going to court, like I would press charges, and then I will go to court and say, "Oh, I want to drop him," because he made everything seem like it's gonna get better, not realizing each time it was getting worse. It
Yeah.
was getting worse. It was getting worse. And when I lost my son, I really lost. I lost a part of me. Um, I lost me altogether. And we had friends who was due, a friend that was due about that time, and actually had her child on my due date. I was made to go visit this child, and I had anger because I was hurt because you beat my baby out of me. You threatened me, but a lot of times, people don't realize you go back because you're comfortable. That's like Um, that's a comfortable situation. It's a comfortable but uncomfortable situation, meaning I know this person. I don't have to learn anything new or learn anybody new. I'm okay with this. But then there's the downfall where the abuse is gonna come.
Yeah. And you're not knowing when. And it could be anything to snap them off and stuff. And I'm so sorry you lost a child. I mean, there's nothing, the pain is just that anybody can express. And I'm not trying to pry, but how long did you stay in a relationship after that? Just curious.
It wasn't long. I just finally I couldn't do it. I had hate in my heart for him. Um and I just couldn't. I couldn't. Maybe 2 months after that, and then I was gone. I just could not do it anymore.
Was that the last abusive relationship you were in?
No, it was like I became prone to abusers.
Yeah.
After that, I
And
got into another relationship that was really, um, the young man was like awesome. He was, he treated me so good, but because my ex wasn't finished with me, all the drama that came, he couldn't handle that.
yeah.
It was too much. Um, we got tags stolen off cars. The utility, we paid a utility bill, come home to no utilities, where my ex done took the whole meter
Meter
out of
box.
the boat.
Oh, Lordy.
You know, we might come home to the house, the door kicked in, and it was just too much.
Yeah.
You know, he said, I cannot do this. When you get this situation, you know, we might, but I can't. You know, this right here is risking too many people's lives.
Yeah, that comes the stalking part, and a lot of times the perpetrator, they don't want to give up, and especially narcissists, they have to be in control. And if they're not in control of you, they've lost that control. They don't like that, and so that's why they lash out and try to grab that control back, and they want that control back. Um, and it happens, like I said, it happens so often that people don't really realize it, and it's a dangerous time, especially if you're dealing with narcissistic behavior. Because you're not safe, and you're not safe. It could be years on down the road. You don't know because that's still to them. You're still there. They lost you, and they owned you. You were theirs, and it's sad, but it does happen. And you just have to be cautious and always be prepared for that. And I know it's hard for survivors to live like that, but and they shouldn't have to live like that, but unfortunately a lot of them do. and,
Right.
and again, like I said, it's going to come to the fact that we've got to educate these kids and these children, and hopefully break this cycle that they seem to think that is normal for them when it's not normal. It's not normalcy. There's nothing normal about it.
And I also feel, too, as a community, we need to do better in reporting the issue. People who are bystanders to violence,
Oh
you're an
God, yeah.
accomplice.
Yep.
Mhm.
I remember in my same apartment complex before my situation happened, a young lady living right next door to me. I heard her boyfriend punch the glass out of her door, break into her home. He picked her up out of her sleep and he threw her up against the kitchen wall because she said she was leaving him. And she almost died. And I remember calling 911, and I crawled into my walk in closet to make the report. And I had to whisper because if I could hear her cry for help, our walls were paper thin. I didn't want him to hear me call 911. And I'll never forget, the lady asked me, "Why are you whispering?" I said, "Do you want me to just crawl into my kitchen and put up against my phone against the wall so you could hear this girl's face being punched in? Don't ask me why I'm whispering. Get somebody over here."
Yeah. Right. There's a reason why you're calling 911, right?
And there's a reason why I'm in my closet, for Christ's sake. If he heard me, he would have killed her.
We had a sheriff in, I want to say it was in, well, it was in Florida. And when all this pandemic started, and hospitals were getting overwhelmed and stuff, this is a elected official, a sheriff of a county in Florida, tells the victims to suck up the abuse because there's no place for them to go because the shelters are closed. Suck it up, do what their perpetrator, deal with what they're going through, and if their perpetrator, gets physical, don't call them because there's no help. And this was on the national news about 7 months ago. I couldn't believe that was on there. A sheriff saying that, don't call us, we can't come because of the coronavirus. And it's sad, but how many sheriffs aren't showing up across this nation to calls, or police officers showing up to calls when victims are calling? It's going on daily. And it's I don't know. Like I said, we got a pandemic within a pandemic, and as soon as we get this vaccine out there, we're going to see the true effects of what happened during this pandemic. Like you were saying earlier, the isolation in the homes with their perpetrators and the victim, the victim and the perpetrator being in the homes, the children being locked up in the home with these victims and these perpetrators. These perpetrators or these victims can't call 911 because why? Because their assailants right there. How the hell are they going to call 911? They're not going to. These children aren't making the calls either because they're afraid. But wait till this pandemic's over with and see how many, divorce court lawyers. There was a thing a while back on the news said that the divorce court lawyers are already going to have astronomical cases because of this, because domestic violence has risen so much and child abuse has risen so much because of this pandemic, because of what's people being isolated together and stuff. And it's just heartbreaking. And who else know? We don't even know what else is going on behind closed doors. The alcoholism, the drug addiction, the drug abuse, and all this stuff that's going on. The child abuse, the sexual
Mhm.
abuse. It's all happening. We're just all don't know about it yet because people were so wrapped up in the
Right.
coronavirus, and they're not really talking about what really else is going on. They're not talking about the murders in Chicago, the 17 that happened last weekend, or the five that happened in Yakima, where I live at, 2 weeks or last weekend. They're not talking about those, all that stuff that's going on. They're not talking about the mother that shot the kids and the father. They're not talking about that on the news, because what are they talking about? Either the election or the coronavirus. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about nothing else. If it wasn't for people like you, people like me, and when Medora get on there, people wouldn't talk about this stuff. They wouldn't have a
Right.
conversation. They don't care. It's
Right.
not out. It's not out there. It's not in your local news. I mean, it's not. I mean, that's a. But it will. Everything's going to come out, and I have a feeling that 2017 was our worst year for domestic violence and murder and suicides, in recent history. And I have a feeling that 2020 is going to take over that, and the sexual assault cases and everything that's going to come out of this, and child abuse and stuff, is going to be so crazy that 2020 is going to blow all numbers out of the wall, off the charts. And we're seeing it. We'll see it every day. You know, I just
Right.
uh, I just hope that 2021 is a lot better. We get this vaccine out there and we can get back and work with these legislatures and our our elected officials and get some laws on the books, get some funding out there for. Funding is another major issue as far as sexual assault victims. They don't have any help. Domestic violence victims, they have no help. There's nothing out there. Financially, there's no education. There's nothing showing them how to, counseling to give them help to learn how to live without the
Mm-hmm.
abuse, to learn how to live without the sexual abuse. You talk about children. There's children being sold by their own parents out there for their drug addiction because of this pandemic, because they can't get drugs, so they sell their child to the drug dealer to get drugs. And this is going on across our nation right now, every day.
Right.
And you know what? What's going to happen to that victim once they come out of this, and once we get through all this and they start speaking up? Now we not need to get them help. We need to get them the counseling they're going to need. This is, you know, sexual abuse is not something, or domestic violence is not something that, yeah, once it happened to you, it goes away. It doesn't go away.
It's
It's
something you will deal with every day of your life.
for the rest of your life. You think, I said I was in the Marine Corps. Yeah, we as veterans, we deal with PTSD. What do you think victims of domestic violence and victims of child abuse deal with on a daily basis? They're dealing with
Yes.
that too. They're also dealing with more than that. They're dealing with emotional detachment. How did you get it attached to somebody? If you were sexually abused by somebody for so long, how do you get close to somebody? You got emotional detachment. They're dealing with that also. Same thing with domestic violence. You're going to have that emotional detachment. You're not going to be able to. You're going to always have that fear. Is this going to be the same thing going to happen to me again? And it's something that we've got. Like I said, we need to address, and we're not doing it. We're not doing it. Obviously, we're not doing a well enough job in this nation. We're the most powerful, the smartest, the strongest nation, the most wealthiest nation on earth, and yet we can't fix some of the simplest things on earth. You know, that's our problem. You know, that's our issue as Americans, and we've become accustomed to it. We think that um, you've made a comment about people deserve it, or the wealthy think it shouldn't be that way. You know, white people shouldn't feel that they're different than anybody else, but they do. I mean, it's
Right.
unfortunate. That's the racism part of it, and that's why when Madonna was talking about how people in lower poverty areas they're treated differently by law enforcement. You bet they are. You don't see cops flying into a rich neighborhood, lights and sirens and guns drawn, do you? But you send them into a black community, how many cops you got coming in on one little call? Like that poor disabled young man that was just murdered, what, 4 months ago? I can't remember his name right off the top of my
Hmm.
head. But he was disabled, and his family, his mom was sitting there crying. He's mentally ill. He needs help, and he had a knife in his hand. They couldn't tase him. No, they had to shoot him. Really? He was
Mm.
mentally ill. Why wasn't there mental help there? Why wasn't there a counselor on site? Somebody that's
Right.
trained for that to talk him out of it. Why didn't you tase him? Yeah, I have difficulties in seeing that stuff go on too, and it's equal inequality here, and it's sad, and it's we're gonna have to start stepping up and picking up the pace and try to get more and more help out there and get more and more education, because if we don't do this, we're not going to have much of a country, because everybody's going to feel that everybody's free game, and that's how I see it. When Tina got murdered, it was 7 women on an average per day were dying domestic violence, and it went to 5. Now it's down to, well, last check it was 3. Who knows? Right now it could be, you know, who knows what the numbers are now for domestic violence.
Right.
We don't know, because, like I said, numbers aren't going to come in.
Yep.
Um,
And everybody's not reporting everything.
nope,
But
nope.
I want to say to you, Don and Midori, thank you guys so much. We're nearing in on our time. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to bring awareness on such touchy subjects. If there's anyone out there going through any form of sexual assault, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 1-800-656 HOPE. And if you want to go online, type in RAINN.org. Um, Remember, if you are an abuser and you don't understand what sexual assault is, if a man tell a woman no or a woman tell another woman no, no means no. It do not matter who it is. Just because you marry do not give you an entitlement to anyone. It does not matter what a person have on. You should not touch what do not belong to you. Ask first. And if they say no, no means no. I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always, share your comments. We will answer them. And again, Don and Adori, thank you guys so much. Keep pushing forth. You guys can follow Don with the Tina Stewart Foundation. He's always advocating on Facebook. You can also find Midori, on Facebook, guys. So continue to press forward. Let's continue to be a voice for other people, and let's continue to work together to break the silence on domestic violence and end the violence in it all. As we stated here before, domestic violence, sexual assault work hand in hand. But if we all stand together to put an end to it, we can work together to end this pandemic within the pandemic. Every one of you be blessed, and thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Don.
God
Thank you,
bless you all.
Midori.
And don't forget child abuse too. Child abuse is part of the
Yes,
violence and sexual abuse too. So,
yes.
child innocent victims. All right, you guys. Hey, I love you. Thank you for letting me come on here to speak tonight, and I appreciate it. And y'all have a safe and weekend and a Merry Christmas, okay?
All
And a
right, you
Happy New
too.
Year. Thank you.
Awesome.